15 past with the breaking news. Reuters is now reporting Iran-linked hackers are claiming they have breached the personal email inbox of FBI Director Kash Patel. Those hackers have published photographs of Patel along with his purported resume and what appears to be personal correspondence dating between 2010 and 2019. But MS Now has not confirmed that any of those documents are legitimate. And DOJ tells our Carol Lenig they do not know the details of this apparent hack. Joining us now, former CIA director and MS Now senior national security and intelligence analyst John Brennan, and Jane Harman, former congresswoman and ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee and president emerita and distinguished fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Welcome to you both. Director Brennan, how concerning is this report? And we want to point out the hack does not cover his time as FBI director, but it does allegedly cover the time he worked in national security and counterterrorism at DOJ, and depending on how far into 2019, possibly his time on the National Security Council.
Well, Alex, the Iranians have very, very sophisticated cyber capabilities, both from the standpoint of collection as well as disruption. And I'm sure that the war ongoing right now with Iran has led to an increase in their efforts and determination to target a number of individuals with their cyber hacks and capabilities. So again, I'm unsurprised that the Iranians are engaged in such activities. We've had to face it for the past 10 or 15 years in terms of what the Iranians have been able to do. And given that, the FBI director is a high-profile target, it's again, not surprising that the Iranians would do something like this. But again, I have to underscore just how sophisticated the Iranians have become and their ability to do things like this.
Do you have any concerns, sir, that it goes beyond just being an embarrassment for Kash Patel and that could enter the realm of compromising national security?
Well, again, it depends on what the Iranians have been able to access, whether it's against Kash Patel or others, and to see whether or not what they have been able to obtain gives them some type of insight into national security matters. But again, the reporting is that these were older emails from Kash Patel. So again, it's unclear exactly what the Iranians might have. But again, I think other officials also need to be extra vigilant during these times.
So, Congressman, this comes after the president announced that he is once again delaying attacks on Iran's power plants. He's extending the deadline for them to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, this time by 10 days. Here's what the president had to say. Take a listen.
Well, the Iranians asked me to do that, and I was not happy with them because I made a statement that we're having productive negotiations. I don't know that they get there. Maybe they do, maybe they won't. And so I gave them a 10-day period. They asked for 7. You're going to say, oh, Trump's a terrible negotiator. They asked for 7, and I said, I'm going to give you 10 because they gave me ships.
So that's 7 versus 10 days. Is this about Trump giving Iran more time or giving himself more time?
It's probably about both, but let me add to John's answer before, which is that not only do the Iranians have great cyber capability, but we have dumbed down our cyber defenses, both at DHS, DOJ, and DOD. That's been a Trump priority. Experts have been moved out. And so what happens next time? And by the way, your reporting was that Reuters found this out because the Iranians claimed credit. It isn't that our intel agencies found this out. And I would just point out, it's not just Iran. China has incredible cyber capability. And when I chaired the Commission on National Defense Strategy in 2024, we were briefed on the fact, it wasn't classified, that China might try a major cyber attack on U.S. infrastructure ahead of or contiguous with some effort to annex Taiwan. So we're not ready for this. You asked me, sorry.
No.
What was the other thing you asked me?
Well, I was asking you about whether this 7 versus 10-day time frame, and you said both. I mean, you did answer it. You think it's both. It's serving both Iran and the president, giving himself more time.
Well, let's see what the deadline is tomorrow morning or tomorrow lunch. I mean, his deadlines move around very quickly. And remember the TACO acronym, Trump always chickens out. I want to add to that the CACO acronym, Congress always chickens out. Let's see what the House does with this TSA bill now.
Director Brennan, a senior White House official told MS Now the president is, quote, getting a little bored with Iran, and he just wants to declare victory and move on. And the Wall Street Journal reports the Pentagon is weighing whether to send 10,000 ground troops to the Middle East to give Trump more military options. They cite Defense Department officials with knowledge on that one. But that would mark a major escalation because we know thousands of Marines and airborne troops have already been ordered to the region. So what should we make of that contradiction?
Well, I think with your previous question, as far as the extension of this deadline, a charitable interpretation of that is to give negotiations more time to see whether or not there could be a compromise reached, as well as to give U.S. military forces the opportunity to set the battlefield and to prepare for what I would think is going to be a horrific escalation of hostilities if, in fact, we use these forces, these Marines and others, to land. I'm not surprised also if Donald Trump is getting bored with this. This is going on, I think, far longer than he or his advisors thought would happen. And it appears that the Iranians are going to continue to be defiant and will be able to survive this military onslaught. But we know that Donald Trump jumps from one thing to another. It's a way to either deflect attention from any of the challenges that he faces, but also this really requires, tremendous strategic thinking as far as how we're going to get ourselves out of this mess. And it's clear that, to me at least, that the Trump administration doesn't know what the appropriate next step is, particularly in light of the continued challenges that we face in the Strait of Hormuz and the Iranian ability to continue to be able to send missiles at Gulf states and Israel. And this war seems, there's no sense that it's coming to a close. In fact, the potential for escalation, I think, is very real and very, very worrisome.
Congresswoman David Remnick in The New Yorker writes, quote, in war, truth is the first casualty. Sometimes the culprit is the observer, the propagandizing correspondent, mythologizing historian. Now, 3 weeks into a war of choice, the chief offender is the President of the United States. And as you've heard, the president said Iran posed an imminent threat, but there's no evidence of that. He said the war has already been won. Clearly, we see, and to the director's point, that is not true. He says this isn't a war per se. What do you do when you can't trust your president to tell the truth about a life or death situation?
Well, to repeat something I just said, Congress gets in the game and authorizes or not the use of military force in Iran. What we're seeing, I think, in addition to what John said, which I agree with, is a divergence of the military mission and the diplomatic mission. The military mission is full-on mission creep at this point. And we've seen this movie in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in our endless wars that this president said he would never repeat. So I see that. And I do see our young soldiers, brave soldiers in harm's way. But if the president's bored, good God, what have we won here? Let's understand that reports are that we've only destroyed a third of Iran's missiles. I think we've hardened their regime. They are composed in a way that we can decapitate layer after layer, and they get stronger. And we've now given them sanctions relief, so they're even stronger. And they still have a big card to play in the Strait of Hormuz. I think a card that Trump is missing is to form an international coalition, which is available to him to police the Strait of Hormuz and also to back up efforts after this to keep Iran weak. And by the way, if we hadn't pulled out of the JCPOA, we would be in a stronger position with respect to Iran's nukes, which are still there, their capacity, and the highly enriched uranium is still deep underground. And for all we know, maybe moved around now, so it's even harder to capture or recapture if we're able to do it.
Yeah. Excellent point, all of you. Thank you so much. Former CIA Director John Brennan, former Congresswoman.
Imagine waking up to find hackers claiming they've broken into the personal email of the FBI director. That's not the plot of a spy thriller. It's happening right now.
It really grabs your attention, doesn't it? Today, we're breaking down what's known about this alleged hack, its potential fallout, and how it ties into rising tensions with Iran.
We'll dig into the hackers' claims, whether any real secrets were exposed, and how cyber threats from Iran have shifted over the past decade.
Plus, we'll talk about the U.S. response, both the official denials and the broader scramble to shore up defenses. And we'll look at the bigger question. Are we ready for this new era of cyber warfare?
So, let's start with what's actually confirmed. Reuters says Iranian-linked hackers published personal photos and old correspondence of the FBI director, but there's no independent proof the documents are genuine.
Right, and the Department of Justice even told reporters they don't yet know the details of the hack. It's murky. This could be a mix of real material and disinformation to embarrass a high-profile target.
And the emails allegedly date from 2010 to 2019, not covering his time as FBI director, but possibly including sensitive years in national security roles.
That timing matters. Even if it's old, personal correspondence from those years might still offer insight, or at least be used for leverage or propaganda.
That actually reminds me, these kinds of breaches aren't new with Iran. Experts have watched Iranian hackers grow more sophisticated for over a decade.
Absolutely. Iran's invested heavily in cyber tools, both for spying and disruption. Whenever tensions spike, like during the current standoff, their cyber activity ramps up.
And it's not just targeting high-profile figures. Whole agencies, infrastructure, sometimes even private companies get swept up in these campaigns.
Plus, it's not only Iran. China's also been flagged for potentially prepping major cyber attacks, especially if tensions rise over hotspots like Taiwan.
Funny you say that there's a growing sense that U.S. cyber defenses haven't kept pace. Some experts blame it partly on leadership shakeups at key agencies.
Yeah, and there's concern that moves to downgrade cyber priorities at places like DHS and DOJ made us more vulnerable. When seasoned experts leave, institutional knowledge walks out the door.
And then, to add insult to injury, our own agencies didn't even discover this breach. The Iranians apparently bragged about it online, and journalists picked it up first.
That's a real wake-up call. We're not just in a technological race. It's about information, speed, and resilience. If adversaries move quicker, the damage multiplies.
Switching gears a bit, this cyber story unfolds as the president delays further military action and negotiations with Iran drag on. There's a real debate about strategy here.
What's striking is how deadlines keep shifting. Sometimes it feels like the administration's buying time for itself as much as for Iran. But meanwhile, the Pentagon is reportedly weighing sending thousands more troops to the region.
That could signal a major escalation. Yet reports suggest the president's losing patience or even getting bored with the drawn-out crisis.
And that mix of uncertainty, mission creep, and lack of clarity on objectives makes it all the more dangerous. When military and diplomatic goals diverge, history tells us things rarely end well.
You know, that ties right into another problem: public trust. When the president claims victory or cites imminent threats with little evidence, it gets hard to tell what's real in a fast-moving crisis.
It's unsettling. If leadership can't give straight answers, then Congress needs to step up and assert its role, whether that means authorizing force or demanding more oversight.
And at the same time, our adversaries capitalize on confusion. Iran's regime, for instance, often gets stronger when external pressure rises and facts get muddled.
Exactly. If we're serious about national security, we need clear strategy, credible information, and maybe most of all, a coalition approach, especially in hotspots like the Strait of Hormuz.
We've covered a lot, so let's pull out the big lessons. First, cyber threats from adversaries like Iran aren't just a nuisance. They can expose weaknesses at the top.
Second, the U.S. needs to rebuild and prioritize its cyber defenses. Leadership and technical know-how are both critical.
Third, when political messaging gets murky, our ability to respond smartly, militarily, or diplomatically takes a real hit.
If you're listening, here's one action step. Pay attention to who's setting the cyber agenda and demand accountability. Pressure your leaders to invest in serious, long-term cyber strategy.
That's it for today. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll be back with more insights soon.